I have a little bit of an embarrassing confession to make. See, I've got this YouTube channel where I talk about books and reading. And so far this year, I think I've started probably over 50 books. Want to take a guess how many I've actually finished? Well, I don't even know because I stopped trying to count, but I can tell you it's probably less than 10. Spoiler alert, I have ADHD. So, my bedside table is a monument to how disorganized and chaotic my brain is. Every single book on there is something that I thought to myself at some point, hey, this seems like it would be fun to read. And 10 pages later, I was like, ooh, look, something shiny. And I was off to the next thing. So here's the thing, I probably should have realized way sooner that I have ADHD. But the thing is, ADHD is a tricky thing because it presents itself in all sorts of different ways. And throughout most of my school life, I kind of coasted by on this neat little trick I have where I have the ability to hear things and remember them, which meant that I could pretty much coast through most of school without reading anything. And so the only things I ever had to read were things I actually genuinely wanted to read. And those things were never much of an issue for me because, I was interested in them at the time. And this worked for me for the longest time until I got to law school. As it turns out, it is pretty much impossible to fake your way through reading 800 pages of case law, written mostly by dudes who have this sick obsession with Latin and write as if they're getting paid by the word. Who knew? And so that was kind of where I realized my whole shtick was kind of up. And it wasn't until after I graduated that I actually got diagnosed, and it was in the most random way possible. I had a sort of generic checkup with a doctor. I think it was for insurance purposes. I had to get a physical, and as I was talking through the GP, I was talking through some of the things, my general health, the fact that I had trouble sleeping, the fact that I was often agitated and anxious, and he asked me a few follow up questions. And he said to me, you probably have ADHD. You should probably get that looked into. You should probably look into that. Um, and I didn't. You know why I didn't? Because I was like, you know what? That's a problem for kids. I'm already done school. It won't be an issue. And so I kind of put it on the back burner for years and years and years. And it was only recently that I actually got a real assessment and was officially diagnosed. And so here it is. Now I'm an adult living with ADHD. It's not ruining my life, but it definitely makes certain things way more difficult, including finishing books. So, as I was spending years and years and years thinking that I was lazy or undisciplined, here's one of the things that I wish someone had told me earlier. About 11% of kids in the United States have been diagnosed with ADHD. About 5% of adults globally have been diagnosed. And those numbers are probably woefully underrepresentative. As my current doctor told me, ADHD is severely underdiagnosed and severely overprescribed, which, if you think about it, is probably kind of true. Not nearly enough people who actually have ADHD are being diagnosed, and those that are immediately getting put on pills. And that leads us to the current state of where we're at. But that doesn't help you or me or anyone watching this video who might be dealing with ADHD or know someone who is. And to make things even more exciting, ADHD comes in three fun filled flavors: inattentive, hyperactive impulsive, and then the combo meal of both mashed together. And to make things even crazier, ADHD likes to bring friends to the party. And so the comorbidity rates, and that's a fancy medical way of saying when you have one condition, you're likely to have another, of ADHD and autism is extremely high, as it is with dyslexia and other reading disorders. And so chances are, if you have ADHD, you might not know it because you might think you have something else, or you might think you just have ADHD when it's actually ADHD combined with any one of its friends. Isn't life fun? But my purpose in making this video is to reassure you that you're not broken, your brain just works differently. And before we go any further, I just want to give you a quick PSA to say I am not a doctor. I'm not at least not a medical doctor, and you should not take advice from people on the internet. And yes, I recognize the irony of someone on the internet telling you not to take advice from people on the internet, but just don't do it. You know what I'm talking about. Let's go. Right, so reading with ADHD. I'm going to try and organize this a little bit so it's not just my ADHD brain throwing a bunch of information at your ADHD brain, and so none of us can communicate on anything. And I'm going to do that by trying to bucket these things into kind of three levels. We're going to start with like our foundational strategies, and then we'll work our way up to sort of the weird, but actually somehow kind of still works type of strategies. And then in the middle, we'll have kind of the middle zone, right? And spoiler alert, my favorite strategy in all these is in the third bucket. And so we'll talk about that when we get there. All right, so let's start with some of the foundational stuff. And this stuff is stuff that probably will work for everyone. And as we kind of go up the list, I will be honest with you, some of the things on this list don't even work for me, but they're things that I've heard work for other people. And so I'm sharing them anyway. And I leave it to you to pick and choose what's going to work for you. So starting at the very beginning, you need to understand that if you have ADHD, you probably need to realign your expectations of what is a normal amount of time to read for. I used to think that I should, and that word should is going to be key in almost all these strategies because you need to throw should out the window. But I used to think that I should be able to sit down and read for 2 straight hours. And that if I wasn't able to do that, it was because there was something wrong with me. The reality is that's just not the way an ADHD brain works. And so, what you need to understand if you want to read and not beat yourself up is you need to adjust your expectations so that instead of trying to read 100 pages or read for 2 hours, set yourself achievable goals. 1 page, 15 minutes. After each of those things is met, give yourself a literal cookie. Reward yourself. Understand that your brain is built in a different way and it comes with certain advantages. But one of the things it's not good at is focusing on the same task for really long periods of time. So if you want to get through a really long book, you're probably going to have to break that down into little pieces. When I read War and Peace, I did not read that in 2 weeks' time. I read it over the course of months. There was periods of time where I was literally just reading 3 to 4 pages a day. And you know what? I still got done. I still got done reading one of the longest books of literary fiction that exists in the world, and I am so happy I did it. Who cares that it took me 4 months to do it? Even if it takes you a year or a year and a half, it's still going to get done. Just do what works for your brain. Related to the first strategy, the second strategy is about still understanding that you can have goals, but those goals probably shouldn't be objective based. Instead, they should probably be time based. So rather than setting yourself a goal of reading 15 pages, set yourself a goal of reading for 15 minutes. If 15 minutes feels too long, make it 10. If that's still too long, make it 5. Go as low as you need to. And the other thing that's important here is if you are not succeeding, if it's just not going in, give yourself permission to take a break or even to quit for the day. It is completely okay because if you don't, here's what's going to happen. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You are going to say, okay, I got to keep reading for the next 20 minutes. Your eyes are going to be on the page. You're going to be flipping pages. You're going to be 6 pages later and you're going to say to yourself, what did I just read for the last 6 pages? If I had a dime for every single time that happened to me, well, I probably would have retired a while ago. But the point is, you can't force your brain to focus. If it's not working, put it aside. Otherwise, all you're doing is running up against a wall. Spoiler, wall's fine, you are not. Next up, control your environment. You might have noticed the lighting in here just changed. You might think that has something to do with what I was just talking about for the purposes of the video. In fact, it's not. I just had the wrong lights on. So there you are. Make sure that when you are setting yourself up to read, you're setting yourself up for success. If a specific type of background noise helps you focus, do that. If it's coffee house chatter, put that on the background or actually go to a literal coffee house. Make sure you're comfortable. Make sure the temperature in the room is right. Basically, find the environment that works for you and protect it like it's the last lifeboat on the Titanic. There was a point where it helped me to focus when I would listen to the same song on loop over and over again because it would allow me to kind of tune out the lyrics and just have this constant background noise. I did this for about a year and a half with Happy by Pharrell. I really hate that song now, but for that moment in time, it worked for me. So find the environment that works for you and make sure you are using that to your advantage. Also, and I can't stress this enough, read what you like. I spent years trying to force myself to read the things that I thought I should be reading, those classic literary texts, those dense texts of theory. At the end of the day, life is too short to waste time on things that, you know what, are just not going to go anyway. They're just not going to go in. They're just don't. They won't. They're not going to go into your brain. Your brain wants to absorb certain information and it doesn't want to absorb other information. So stop fighting it. Do what your brain is asking you to do and pick things that you enjoy reading. If something is not speaking to you, put it aside. Maybe you'll come to it at another point later on in life, and finally, it'll be something that you can actually appreciate and enjoy. It's entirely possible. But for the time being, you don't necessarily need to challenge yourself with every single book that you read. Yes, it's important to kind of go outside of our comfort zones, but at this point, your goal is to build momentum. It's not to kind of run the marathon. It's just to build up the habit, build that muscle. And eventually, there are more difficult books that you'll be able to read. But first, you need to kind of build that reading habit to begin with. And the problem with a lot of people with ADHD is they feel like they just can't or they will never be able to build that habit. And so they don't even try. So start with things that are just a little bit below your comfort level and then work your way up to those things that are a little bit harder. Don't be ashamed if you have to put something aside. That is completely okay. Okay, so now we've got the basics down. Those are things that I think would apply to pretty much anyone who has any form of ADHD, whether it's any one of the three types that I listed at the beginning of the video. I feel like those things in the beginning section will apply to everyone. Now we're going to move into slightly weirder territory that might work for some people and work less so for others. But again, try to see if it works. If it does, great. If it doesn't, move on, pick something else, right? So starting with this one is, again, remember I said this was going to be a little bit weird. Move around while you read. Now, reading is not typically associated with movement. In fact, it's pretty much considered the definition of a sedentary activity. But especially if you have a hyperactivity style of ADHD, like this guy, you might have noticed based on the hand movements, moving while you read can be really helpful. So that could mean doing the treadmill desk thing, walking while you're reading. If you've got a lot of room, you might be able to actually literally walk in circles and pace while you read. Whatever whatever is comfortable. Like if it comes to fidgeting, maybe use a fidget spinner or other kind of devices that will just keep your body moving while you're focusing on the page, and that'll help you channel some of that excess energy into a different thing so your brain can focus on the words that are on the page. Next up, and here's a big one that you will hear a lot about from a lot of different sources, try out what's known as active reading. So, active reading is when you are engaging with the text in some way. You are, writing in the margins, you are highlighting, you are taking notes at the end of chapters, you're discussing with someone else maybe. It's the opposite of passive reading. Passive reading is just literally opening up a book and kind of passively ingesting things through your eyeballs and then flipping from page to page and then getting to the end without having really spared a moment to actively think about the stuff that you're reading. And passive reading is the enemy of the ADHD brain because when you engage in passive reading, you are basically giving your brain a break. Because the moment you try and do this, your brain is going to go elsewhere, do something else, think about something else. You don't want to do that, right? So try active reading, marginalia, notes in the margins. Try reading out loud. I know it's going to sound stupid. I know it's going to feel awkward. I know you're going to feel like a kindergartner. Doesn't matter. Give it a shot. What do you have to lose? Okay, so this next one is particularly helpful if you are trying to retain the information you're reading. Maybe it's nonfiction and you just want to remember it. Maybe you're studying for a course. I don't know. But if you want to remember the information that you're reading and you want to be able to focus more, one of the cool things you can do is use something called the Feynman technique, named after the Nobel Prize winning physicist Richard Feynman. And the idea behind this is pretty simple. It's you take what you've read and then you teach it back at a level that a fifth grader, or maybe it's a 5-year old, I don't know, you teach what you learned back to someone else. The actual age of the person doesn't matter so much. What matters is that you're taking the information that you've already kind of put in your brain and you're structuring it in a way that is logical, and it forces your brain to do a little bit of extra work. And it also has the added benefit of when you're reading the text, because you know that you're going to have to teach this back later, your brain's going to be like, huh, maybe I should pay attention to this because there's could be a quiz on this later. Not so much a quiz, but I'm going to have to teach it back, right? So the Feynman technique, particularly helpful if you have to retain information. I have used this a ton, mostly because I actually do end up having to teach a lot of the stuff that I read because that's what I do for a living. These next two strategies were game changers for me when I realized that using them was not cheating. So the first one is something known as pre-reading. And pre-reading is as simple as saying, hey, you know what? That thing that I need to read, maybe I should do a little bit of homework beforehand to understand what it is that I'm about to learn. This is going to be helpful for any more sort of complicated or dense texts where you can kind of build yourself a framework on which to throw all the information onto as you're reading. Because if you just go into a text cold for the first time, especially if it's a particularly difficult text, your brain has to do two things at the same time. One, it has to absorb the words that are on the page, which for the ADHD brain is already difficult enough, at the same time as understanding brand new concepts and figuring out where to slot them in your brain's hierarchy of information. If you already have an idea of what you're going to come up against, then you've already kind of got the organizational structure laid out. And now, as you're reading, you already know where that information goes. So, pre reading is not cheating. Pre reading is giving your brain a chance to focus on one thing at a time, just the reading part, as opposed to the organizing and connecting part, which is something you can get away with doing beforehand. The other thing that's related to this is using what's known as secondary sources. And so a secondary source is anything that talks about the source that you're reading in the first place. So the source that you're reading in the first place would be your primary source. If you read a book about another book, then the book that The second one is the secondary source. You could watch a YouTube video about the book. You could read a Wikipedia article. All those things are secondary sources. And so secondary sources are the thing that to me was the magic unlock for me. I used to think for some reason that in order to really understand something, I needed to dive straight into the primary material. And if I didn't understand it on the first read, I was stupid, that I just wasn't smart enough, that I couldn't compete, that I couldn't keep up with everyone else. Everyone else obviously understands this the first time around. And it was only much, much later that I realized that that is so far from the truth. There is my favorite example of this. Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. The first time I read this book was I was in my first year of university, and I read through the whole book cover to cover, went in cold because someone else told me that I should read it because it changed their life. You know what? I read that whole book. I literally read every single page. I understood none of it. I went back to that book 15 years later, having learned a ton more about philosophy, read through it again, and still only understood about 50% of it. If I were going to go back to that book again today, as I'm reading through it, I would have with me a secondary source that explains those concepts, and then I would read it alongside the primary source. That is not cheating. That is how you learn new self. There's nothing wrong with having someone explain what's going on. One of my favorite ways of doing that in 2025 is I'll take out my phone and I will turn on an AI assistant. We've used ChatGPT. You can use Grok, you can use Perplexity, you can use whatever AI assistant you like. Put it on voice mode, and as you're reading, I'll just shoot questions at it, and I'll have it answer me back like a kind of really well-read friend. And just like a well-read friend, I'm not going to believe everything it tells me, but it might help me understand a few things that I just was struggling with myself in the first place. And it's not cheating; it is just helping you understand what's going on. No one ever thought going to class was cheating when they went to university. So why is this any different? So use secondary sources. It will help you take away a lot of the stress that comes with reading. Also, and this is another one that took me a long time to understand, timing matters. What do I mean by that? If you're the type of person who always tries to read before going to bed and then ends up falling asleep after three paragraphs, like me, which is ironic because I don't sleep well, but I'll fall asleep with a book in my face. But I digress. There are certain times a day where different people do different things. We have something called a circadian rhythm, whereby there's different activities that are better suited for different parts of the day. There's a ton of research around this. Here's the challenge though. If you read that research, the first thing you will realize is that A, it is based off of averages. The ADHD brain is not average. It's neurodivergent, it's not neurotypical. So by definition, the stuff that works for most people probably won't work for you. What that means is you're going to have to figure out your own rhythm, your own sort of cadence of what works for you. If reading in the evening isn't working for you, try waking up 15 minutes earlier and reading for a little bit in the morning. Try reading during your lunch break. Maybe mid afternoon is your time slot. I have no idea. I've gone back and forth at different periods in my life. There's different parts of the day that would work better for me. Try out a bunch of things, see what works, abandon what doesn't, give it a shot. What do you have to lose? Okay, now we get into the fun stuff. This is the stuff that is a little bit weird, a little bit wacky, kind of unhinged. Might work for you, might not, but it's some of this stuff has really, really helped me out. And so I'm gonna put it out there. And if it's crazy to you and you think it's just absolutely too weird to try, then that's fine. But you know what? As I've said throughout this video, what do you got to lose? So the first one in this category is read multiple books at the same time across different genres, different lengths, different whatever. Now, I know conventional wisdom says focus all of your attention on one thing at a time. Focus is important. Don't be a quitter. Well, you know what? Fuck conventional wisdom because conventional wisdom hasn't gotten you anywhere. The way that your brain works is not meant to focus on one thing at a time. And so, as much as it might make sense intuitively to say, if my brain is scattered, then what I should do is give it more structure and give it more focus, all you're doing is fighting against your brain. And if you fight with your brain's going to win. Why? Because it literally controls you. How can you win a fight against yourself? This is an existential question. I don't know how to answer it. But my point is, go with what works for your brain. If your brain is tired of reading one thing and wants to try something else, there's a shiny new object over here that seems interesting to it, go with it. Start three, four, five different books. End result, what might happen? Yes, it might take you a few months to finish a book. Maybe it'll take you over a year to finish a book. Maybe by the time you come back to a book, you'll have forgotten some of the stuff that happened. So, okay, big deal. You got to go back and read a chapter or two for the second time. Is that the end of the world? No, because the alternative is that you are going to force yourself into reading one thing and you're going to dread that experience so much that you're going to put the book aside and spend your entire evening watching Netflix instead. Now, don't lie. You've done it. You know you have. And I know you've done it because I've done it, right? So give yourself a break, switch ideas, switch books, read 10 books at a time, Who cares? No one's watching. Next up is one that I thought was a little bit weird the first time I tried it, but you know what? There's something to be said for it, and that's the audio text combination. Now, a lot of people will say, you know what, if you can't read, just listen to the audiobook. And I personally have no issue with that. Like I mentioned at the top of this video, I actually retain information much better in audio format than I do in visual reading format anyway. So to me, there's nothing wrong with consuming information in an audio form. But if you're the type of person who really wants to read, who really wants to have that challenge of reading things, or who prefers to read, or maybe audio just doesn't work for you the way it works for me. If that's the case, then you could try the audio text combination. What this means is as you're reading in the background, you have someone narrating the text to you. This can either be a full blown audiobook or it can be one of just those plain old text to speech features that exists on a lot of phones or a lot of computers these days. Now, personally, I find that the quality of narration really matters. So just turning on one of those robotic text to speech apps doesn't work particularly well for me. Whereas having a really good narrator can sometimes elevate the story even beyond just what you would get on the page. But maybe for you, quality of narration isn't a thing. And so just having that text to speech will be enough. The reason this works is because it allows your brain to absorb information in two different ways at once. And the more senses you can engage while you're absorbing information, the more likely it is to stick. Now, in an ideal world, maybe you could engage even more than two or three senses. Maybe you could read a page, you could listen to the audiobook, and you could read with Braille. I don't know. The more senses you engage, the better off you'll be. Start with two. If you work your way up to more, let me know. I'd love to hear what that looks like. Related to the previous point, maybe try out using some tools. I don't mean hammer, chisel, screwdriver, although maybe you could chisel your notes into. No, never mind. I mean, those software tools that exist out there now, there's a million tools for reading. Some of them I've already mentioned. So we talked about text to speech. If you're trying to retain information, one things you can use is Anki or flashcard style stuff where it's going to ask questions back to you and you sort of try and remember the information by quizzing yourself on it. Or the other one that's become really popular in recent years is this idea of bionic reading. Bionic reading is a software that what it does is it will bold the first couple letters in every single word. And supposedly that helps the brain focus on the beginning of every single word. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've tried bionic reading. It didn't do much for me, but your mileage may vary, right? So try it out. At this point, I should just title this video, What Do You Got to Lose? Okay, now I am super excited because this is my favorite strategy of the entire list. It's called chaos reading. And chaos reading is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It is chaotic, it is crazy, it's unhinged, and it's a lot of fun. Now, what is chaos reading? Okay, tell me if you can relate to this. You have a full day ahead of you. You have nothing planned, but you have an appointment at 6 p.m. You are unable to get anything done because all you can fixate on is that appointment that you have to get ready for at 6 o'clock. If that sounds like you, or if you can relate to that idea, then you and I have something in common, and that something is probably the ADHD. Because ADHD brains tend to fixate on things like what is coming up in the future. So when you're reading a book, one of the things that you might get caught up on is what does the ending look like, or how is this going to end? Chaos reading is this idea that you don't have to read things in order. There's no linear way that things have to be done. So you can skip around in a book. And God forbid, you can actually jump to the end of the book, read the ending, and what that does is it frees your brain from worrying about what the end point is. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, no spoilers. It's going to ruin the whole story for me. Is it really? Is what makes a good story really the ending? If you think of your favorite stories of all time, how many of them are really based off of how it ends? I know for me personally, my favorite stories, I could care less how they end. It's how they're told that's really important to me. There's maybe two or three stories in total where there's something special about how it ends. There's a twist or something like that where the ending is really the thing that matters. But really, it's the how you got there. If that wasn't the case, we would never rewatch our favorite movies or we would never reread books. But bottom line is, spoiling the ending isn't the end of the world. And that's not everything that chaos reading is. Chaos reading isn't just about spoiling endings. Chaos reading is basically just permission to let your brain do what it wants to do, which is jump all over the place. Maybe you skip a few paragraphs here, maybe you skip a chapter there, maybe you skim through a part that's particularly boring, too much exposition, maybe people are walking too much. I'm looking at you, Tolkien. Whatever works for you. The idea here is just because a book is printed in a certain order, that doesn't mean you need to consume it in a certain order. It doesn't even mean that you need to focus on a single book at a time. You can jump around a little bit. Is it crazy? Is it chaotic? Yes. But you know what? It's a mess, just like your brain. And if there's one thing I'm trying to get you to understand here is that the less you fight with your brain, the better off you'll be. So let your brain do what it's going to do, and magical things are going to start to happen. And as a side bonus, you're going to have a lot of fun doing this. And last but not least, there is called the nuclear option, medication. We had to talk about this. I go back to the point that I made at the top of this video. I'm not a medical professional. If you do think that medication can help you, talk to someone, talk to a doctor, preferably talk to someone who's specialized in ADHD. um, I am not going to pass any kind of value judgment. I personally do not take medication, but not because I think it's wrong. I know people who have told me that their life got measurably better and their quality of life improved vastly when they finally decided to medicate their ADHD. There's nothing wrong with this so long as you're doing it for the right reasons. So talk to a professional. If it's something that you think can help you, try it out. If you don't need it, don't do it. But the best analogy that I've heard about this is one doctor who said, if you were nearsighted, you would not have any shame going to the eye doctor and getting a pair of glasses. It's the same thing with an ADHD brain. There is no shame in getting treatment that is going to help you accomplish things that a neurotypical person would be able to do with a lot more ease anyway. Again, I'm not telling you you should do it. I'm not telling you you should not do it. I'm telling you it's an option. You should explore it. And there you have it. Those are some strategies that can help you hopefully read more with ADHD. Some of them have really helped me, some of them did nothing for me. Go through them, use what works for you, discard what doesn't. If you have other strategies that I didn't mention, I'd love to hear what they are. Drop them below in the comments. If you try some of these strategies and they work or they don't work, I'd love to hear that too. So let me know, reach out. I'd love to talk about this stuff because the more we talk about this, the less stigma there'll be, the less shame there'll be, and people won't have to struggle with this stuff in silence because you can still be a reader even though you have ADHD. And what that also means is if you have a shelf full of books somewhere that's staring at you because you started them and never finished them and they're silently judging you, well, you can tell that shelf full of books to go fuck off. You're doing your best, and honestly, that's enough. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have about 40 books that I have to go and not finish. Cheers.